It's a secluded house in a forest, surrounded by water and trees. This woman is the nanny of the mansion. She heard that the painter doesn't have long to live, so he wants to gather all his children and grandchildren together. This is the first time the painter has invited so many people to his place. Ji-hee and Bina are the first to arrive at the mansion. They are greeted by the nanny and his first wife, Sun Young. She had left home several years ago and only returned a year ago. The nanny truly appreciated the artist for daring to let his two wives live together in one house. When Sun Young saw Ji-hee and her daughter arrive, she turned and left without any politeness. The nanny also showed no respect for Ji-hee and her daughter. Soon after, the artist's younger brother, Go-chul, also arrived at the villa. This man wasn't exactly a good person either. He had been to prison 5 times and had only been released 2 months ago. The nanny recounted that Ji-hee and her daughter brought a lot of belongings. Apparently, they wanted to stay a while longer, claiming their house was being renovated. But others felt that Ji-hee and her daughter were actually being greedy. The nanny appreciated Bina for her personality. The daughter was very understanding and didn't bother anyone. Go-chul's daughter, Go-eun, also lived in the house. Because Go-chul was frequently in and out of prison, his daughter moved here to live with them. Although Go-eun lived in the house, she didn't get along with anyone. As soon as Go-chul arrived, he rushed towards Sun Young. Go-chul was extremely curious about his brother's current situation. Go-chul's goal was the artist's enormous fortune. Ji-hee was no different from Go-chul. However, this woman had the advantage because her daughter was the only one registered in the household registry. Sun Young, despite being his legally married wife, wasn't registered in the artist's household registry either. Bina went upstairs and opened the closet to put away her belongings. But she felt a little unhappy as she recalled some unpleasant memories from the past. Time passed quickly, and it was time for dinner. The whole family rarely ate together. Dong-woo, the artist's manager, went out with the owner of the villa. The artist was incredibly picky. He was always complaining about the food the nanny cooked. Sometimes he'd say it was cold, other times he'd say it was too salty. To the nanny, the artist was utterly detestable. Every time he complained about the food, she'd have to write a self-criticism report. As soon as Ji-hee sat down, she served him food. He asked if she was going to ask for money again. The artist reminded her that the money Ji-hee had received from him was enough to buy a villa. The artist bluntly declared that he wouldn't give her any more money this time. This man wasn't easygoing either. After scolding his mistress, he turned to criticize his niece. He complained that her makeup was too heavy. Go-eun had to get up and remove it immediately. Hee-jun was the last person to arrive at the table. He was the son of the artist's younger brother. Since the table was full, Dong-woo stood up to give his seat to Hye-jun. After finishing her meal, Bina told Hye-jun to sit in her seat. Suddenly, the artist started scolding Bina, calling her spoiled. She went home without even asking her father how he was doing and stood up. Bina turned to him to inquire about his well-being. Then she asked the artist if he was satisfied. He bluntly stated that blood relations meant nothing, and he didn't care about them at all, so no one should use blood relations to claim inheritance. Although Hye-jun was his nephew, the artist was extremely strict with him. Hye-jun was studying law, but his academic performance wasn't very good. The artist threatened that if Hye-jun's grades were that low again, he would have to find his own way to pay his tuition. Everyone at the table was frightened. The artist scolded them all at once. After dinner, Sun Young went to her room to think about something. Because of the nature of her work, she often suffered from insomnia. Only after taking a dose of brain-boosting medicine did Sun Young finally fall asleep. Only the nanny and the artist's younger brother were awake in the house. Go-chul asked the nanny if she had any ulterior motives for living there for so long. The artist was known for being difficult. How could the nanny have lived there for over 20 years? If he wasn't mistaken, she was living there for the inheritance. Go-chul's guess was correct. It was possible the artist, dissatisfied with his children, would leave his fortune to the nanny. The next day, Bina woke up very early to go jogging, but as soon as she turned around, a flower pot on a high shelf nearly fell on her head. This was extremely dangerous. Bina painfully thought about the past. Regarding the flower pot, no one admitted to it, and no one witnessed it. Ji-hee remembered that this flower pot was a gift she had given the artist for his birthday last year. She immediately blamed the first wife, but of course, Sun Young refused to admit it. Calling the police now wouldn't be appropriate. The artist's birthday was coming up, so calling the police would only cause more trouble. The mention of the artist immediately brought to mind money. It was rumored that his paintings had increased in value again, with some selling for as much as 1 billion won. Everyone wanted to include the paintings in their inheritance. Bina stood up and left. She didn't want to get involved. Heejun ran after her, reminding her cousin to be careful and not to make enemies. But Bina was the only one whose name was on the household registration. Even if she did nothing, she would still become everyone's enemy. Although Heejun's words were well-intentioned, no one knew how genuine her kindness was. After Heejun left, Bina saw a picture of herself as a child. It seemed Bina had suffered a great deal back then, so she didn't want to stay in this villa anymore. The incident with the flower pot was just the beginning. No one knew what else might happen to their family later. Ji-hee was determined not to let her daughter leave. Tomorrow was the artist's birthday, and if Bina just endured a little to keep him happy, they could at least get several hundred million won. With money, the two of them could do anything. Ji-hee, driven by money, didn't care about her daughter's safety. The mother even knelt down and begged her daughter not to leave. Bina had no choice but to stay. Ji-hee began observing each person to see who was suspicious. The artist had so much money, so if one person was eliminated, the remaining ones would naturally get a larger share. Go-chul had a criminal record for fraud 5 times. He was very cunning, so the flower pot incident was very likely his doing. Go-chul sarcastically remarked that Ji-hee wasn't a good person either. She was clearly a family destroyer, and yet she dared to lay hands on Sun Young. There's probably no one in the world more shameless than her. At that time, luckily the artist paid to save Ji-hee from going to jail. In another development, the rumor that Bina and Go-won hated each other wasn't just a rumor. Go-won teased Bina about the flower pot, and Bina directly poured water on Go-won's head. Unexpectedly, Bina wasn't as gentle as she appeared. The artist's attitude towards his grandson was much better than towards his own daughter. He often confided in his grandson, but he never paid attention to his daughter. That evening, the nanny was preparing medicine for the artist. Ji-hee stood nearby, secretly watching. Sun Young also arrived and said she needed to talk to Ji-hee. Tomorrow was the artist's birthday, so reporters would be coming for an interview. The first wife hoped Ji-hee could avoid them. Having 2 women present at the same time didn't seem right. Ji-hee naturally disagreed. She insisted on attending the interview. Sun Young angrily glared at the nanny, who was hiding in a corner eavesdropping. But the nanny didn't expect to be discovered by Go-eun. However, Go-eun didn't intend to report her. Go-eun only asked the nanny to bring her a cup of tea. Although the nanny said nothing, her eyes revealed everything. This family's secrets were truly too numerous. Everyone living here had their own intentions. Even manager Dong-woo, who seemed very honest on the outside, was not simple at all. He took out a photograph and tore it in half. Time passed quickly, and it was the artist's birthday. Ji-hee woke up before Bina. She accidentally discovered a letter on the door. It clearly stated her name as Kim Ji-hee. A little later, the artist's family was extremely busy. Go-won took out her phone to record this moment. Heejun prepared a special gift. Ji-hee told her daughter not to sit idly by, but to learn from Heejun's way of winning over the artist. But Bina completely ignored her. It was already lucky she didn't scare people away. The artist and Sun Young were being interviewed. They had divorced 20 years ago. Now they were together as lovers, not remarried. What was the reason behind this? The artist explained that he didn't care about appearances. Since marrying Sun Young, he had decided she would be his partner for the rest of his life. Ji-hee, sitting next to him, inadvertently let out a laugh. This made the atmosphere incredibly awkward. The villa was quite crowded today, so the nanny called 2 more people to help her. The main characters of the party were the artist and Sun Young. There was also a woman who claimed to be the artist's wife, but basically no one paid any attention to her. At this moment, the reporter asked a very interesting question. They wondered why such a famous artist didn't collaborate with the director to create a classic. The artist admitted he had never thought about it, but Sun Young had considered it. After the interview ended, the first wife noticed Ji-hee seemed hurried, so Sun Young reminded Ji-hee to be mindful of her actions. The nanny witnessed their argument. Besides those 2 women, there were 2 other people arguing in the house. Someone had copied the artist's painting, but Dong-woo couldn't find the culprit. Therefore, the artist was very angry. He even called Dong-woo useless. Sun Young witnessed the whole scene. She advised her husband to calm down, saying that since it was his birthday, they could deal with the matter tomorrow. These 2 people also seemed to dislike the artist. At exactly 9:30 in the evening, everyone celebrated his birthday with a party. While everyone was watching the video that Haijun had meticulously prepared, Ji-hee suddenly brought a glass of juice. Although the artist accepted it, he placed the glass on the table instead of drinking it. After Go-chul finished watching the video, he prepared to perform a song. But before he could start singing, the artist stopped him. Ji-hee took out the birthday card she had prepared. She had only read 2 sentences when the artist told her to stop. Ji-hee was annoyed, while Sun Young seemed happy. She wished her husband a happy birthday and good health. Others also sent their wishes. Dongwoo wished the artist a change of temperament soon. Bai Na reluctantly wished her father a happy birthday. Next, it was the artist's turn to speak. He said that everyone had been working hard these past few days, trying to flatter him. The artist announced that he had terminal cancer and only had about a year left to live. Tomorrow, he would announce his will, which everyone was most interested in. The decision on who gets to inherit the property will be made by him. Anyone with objections should keep them to themselves, as protesting is pointless. The money belongs to the artist, so he can divide it however he wants. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Go Chul suggested everyone take a group photo. He said it was rare for the whole family to be together, so this was a memorable moment. After everyone took the photo, Go Chul brought a resurrection potion for his brother. Ji Hee gave a gift that would surprise the artist. Hye Jun gave the artist a portrait and a box of chocolates. Sun Young told the artist to open the gifts. The first thing opened was the resurrection potion. As a result, this item almost killed the artist on the spot. The pleasant atmosphere of the party was completely ruined. The portrait was also destroyed. The artist angrily left, giving Go Chul no chance to explain. Go Chul was very panicked. He clearly thought someone wanted to harm him. If he didn't do well, he risked not getting his share of the inheritance. Although Ji Hee didn't know what was happening, for her, having one less person to share the inheritance was good news. Bina noticed something wrong with her mother's leg. Ji Hee explained that she had just slipped and fallen. Sun Young entered the room with the painter, but she didn't comfort him as everyone expected. Sun Young coldly told her husband to take a shower, and she would prepare his clothes. It seemed that the couple's relationship wasn't very harmonious. Sun Young even deliberately sarcastically remarked that this must be the most unforgettable birthday for her husband. At this moment, the nanny suddenly entered the room. The couple immediately acted very harmonious. The nanny saw that the couple was still very affectionate with each other. Perhaps Ji Hee's appearance had made Sun Young feel threatened. After the nanny saw the two servants off, she noticed Go Chul touching a bottle of medicine. He looked very panicked. He explained that he was looking for a hangover cure. In short, Go Chul's actions were very suspicious. Then, at 10:30 in the evening, Ji Hee came to the nanny again. She was preparing to bring medicine to the artist, but Ji Hee insisted on going in her place, saying Ji Hee had something to discuss with him. Around 11 o'clock, the nanny met Sun Young. Sun Young wanted to see Go Chul because she needed to discuss something, but in the nanny's memory, the two hadn't spoken to each other in 17 years. Next, Bina, unable to sleep, ran outside in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. After receiving a message, Bina turned around and looked at the villa. The midnight alarm rang. The house finally became quiet. Soon after, the day of the will announcement arrived. The nanny brought coffee to Sun Young, but she kept biting her nails and didn't pay attention to the other person. Bina also woke up very early. She arrived just as the nanny was about to wake the artist. He was a very grumpy sleeper. Every morning the nanny would get scolded, even having to write a self-criticism report. Today, the nanny had assigned Bina the task of waking the artist. She went to the artist's room door, thinking that if she got scolded she'd just ignore it. After all, her father didn't like her. But Bina called out several times and still received no response from the artist. She initially thought he was fast asleep, but then she realized something was wrong. The room was unusually quiet. Bina couldn't even hear the artist snoring. She went to the bed and reached out to check. She was horrified to discover that her father had passed away. A loud scream rang out. Everyone rushed into the room. The artist's lips had turned black. This was a sign of poisoning. Everyone wondered who had committed such a cruel act. Ji Hee was so shocked she couldn't speak. Time rewinds to the artist's birthday. That day, Ji Hee woke up earlier than Bina. She accidentally discovered a letter on her door. The letter clearly stated the sender's name as Kim Ji Hee. When she opened the letter, a key unexpectedly fell to the ground. Ji Hee temporarily ignored the key to focus on reading the letter first. Unexpectedly, the contents were a will. The document also listed the conditions for inheritance, but the conditions had been redacted. Besides the will, the letter also contained a treasure map. It marked the location of the safe and instructions on how to unlock it. The hidden contents were undoubtedly inside. Ji Hee picked up the key from the ground. It seemed to be the key to the safe. But who was the sender? During breakfast, Ji Hee felt anxious and uneasy. She kept wondering who sent the letter and why. This behavior seemed to resemble Sun Young's cunning style, but the situation is similar to something Go Chul might do. Dongwoo, despite his innocent appearance, might very well be the most dangerous character. As for Hye Jun, Ji Hee truly couldn't see through his thoughts. The nanny was very familiar with the house. It wasn't surprising that she knew where the safe was. Therefore, besides Ji Hee and her mother, everyone else was suspicious. Bina glanced at her mother, wondering why she was making such a fuss over just breakfast. After eating, Ji-hee continued observing everyone around her. Go-chul asked Ji-hee what she was doing staring at people so early in the morning. Ji-hee suddenly had an idea. She thought to herself, maybe I'm not the only one who received a letter. So Ji-hee asked Go-chul if he had any problems that morning. He seriously said he was constipated. Then, Go-chul laughed and left, making Ji-hee furious. Sun-young suddenly asked Ji-hee if she should tell him what was wrong, but Ji-hee thought they weren't close enough to sit and talk together. Sun-young threw something into the trash can. Ji-hee quickly picked it up to examine it, but it wasn't the letter. Ji-hee shifted her suspicion to Hae-jun. Hae-jun asked in bewilderment if there was anything on his face. Ji-hee nodded and jokingly replied that there was handsomeness stuck to it. Bina suddenly pulled her mother aside. She asked what her mother was doing so early in the morning. Ji-hee told her daughter not to worry about it. Bina should spend her time trying to win over the artist. Hae-jun ran off to investigate Dongwoo. People living in mansions usually have safes, right? Does the artist have one too? Dongwoo replied that even if he did, he wouldn't reveal it to Ji-hee. Ji-hee investigated further but found nothing, so she decided not to investigate the letter anymore. She should focus on the safe instead. Ji-hee called Bina aside and told her to go for a walk with the artist. Bina disagreed. She argued that the artist's health wasn't good and he needed rest. Since Bina couldn't help, Ji-hee had to rely on herself. Then it was time for the interview. At this moment, no one was in the artist's room. This was the perfect opportunity. Ji-hee decided to sneak into the room, but just as Ji-hee found the safe, the nanny entered, causing her to quickly hide. The nanny cleaned up while secretly eating. Just as the nanny was about to discover Ji-hee, she quickly took out her phone and texted the nanny. The nanny immediately fell into the trap. Ji-hee quickly opened her phone to check. Ji-hee asked the nanny to go to the garden because she had something to discuss. The nanny angrily sighed. How dare that wicked woman order me around? Ji-hee didn't have time to be angry. Finding a way to open the safe was the most important thing. But at that moment, someone entered the room. This time, Ji-hee couldn't escape. Go-chul asked Ji-hee why she was there. Ji-hee made up an excuse, saying she came in to find the artist. This reason was probably too illogical since the artist was being interviewed outside. Ji-hee's plan was interrupted. When she went outside, she was seen by everyone. Ji-hee began to look for the conditions in the will. Then, she remembered what happened last night. At that time, Ji-hee saw the nanny preparing medicine for the artist. Sun-young said she was taking sleeping pills. Ji-hee thought a sleeping pill would solve everything. Ji-hee began planning to steal the pills. Ji-hee sneaked into Sun-young's room. Very quickly, Ji-hee found the sleeping pills. At that moment, there were footsteps outside. Hiding in the room wasn't a good idea, so Ji-hee decided to climb out the window. As a result, she wasn't careful and twisted her ankle, but she still managed to walk back to the front door. Then, Ji-hee was warned by Sun-young again. Ji-hee had only just managed to trick Sun-young. Ji-hee didn't expect the hateful nanny to show up. The nanny brought up Ji-hee's text message asking to see her, and how she waited for an hour without seeing her. Ji-hee didn't hold back and told the nanny, next time you cook, use less salt. This made the nanny extremely angry. Although Ji-hee twisted her ankle, she was still in a cheerful mood. She had obtained the sleeping pills, so she was about to see the will. That evening, Ji-hee took out the sleeping pills and crushed them. At 8:30 in the evening, the whole family prepared to celebrate the artist's birthday. The nanny was grinding peppercorns in the kitchen. Ji-hee's appearance frightened the nanny. Ji-hee had planned to secretly put sleeping pills in the artist's drink, but the nanny called her to dinner, thwarting her plan. That evening, the artist ate heartily, finishing an entire bowl of soup. At 9:30 in the evening, everyone tried various tricks to win him over. Ji-hee poured a glass of fruit juice, then secretly added sleeping pills to it. She brought the drink to the artist, but he placed the glass on the table instead of drinking it. Then came the cruel prank. The fruit juice plan failed, so Ji-hee switched to giving the artist the medicine. A sleeping pill fell into the medicine box. To execute her plan perfectly, Ji-hee even personally fed the medicine to the artist. Just as he finished drinking it, Sun-young suddenly appeared. Ji-hee pretended to be affectionate with the artist to provoke Sun-young. Sun-young asked Ji-hee to go back to her room. Ji-hee hated the other party's arrogant demeanor. Before leaving, she sarcastically told Sun-young not to be so complacent, since neither of them were listed in the household registration book. Ji-hee didn't sleep at all that night. She kept her eyes wide open, watching the clock. When it reached 2 a.m., Ji-hee guessed the sleeping pills had probably taken effect. She cautiously sneaked into the artist's room. He was fast asleep. Ji-hee pressed the switch as instructed in the letter. The safe was indeed hidden in this location. She easily opened it with the key. Finally, the most crucial moment arrived. Ji-hee nervously opened the document bag inside the safe. The words written on it left her speechless. Anyone who views the will without permission, will have their inheritance rights revoked. That person's assets would be divided among others. This was clearly a trap. Ji-hye quickly put everything back in its place. Then she rushed back to her room. But deep down, she still felt anxious and uneasy, because whoever secretly read the will would have their inheritance rights revoked. Hundreds of millions of won in assets would thus slip from her grasp. Early the next morning, Ji-hye heard Bina's screams. Everyone discovered that the artist had passed away. This terrified Ji-hye. She thought she had killed him with sleeping pills the night before. But on second thought, Ji-hye realized it wasn't that serious. A single sleeping pill couldn't possibly be fatal. Could the sleeping pills have been tainted? Ji-hye had stolen them from Sun Young. This implied Sun Young had framed Ji-hye, using her to murder the artist and even depriving her of her inheritance. Everyone immediately reported the incident to the police. The police found a needle mark on the artist's arm, indicating he had not only taken sleeping pills but had also been injected with something else. The police questioned the family about any disturbances the previous night. Sun Young replied that the artist was afraid of being disturbed, so his room was very soundproofed, meaning no one outside could hear anything. Go Chul reported hearing footsteps in the hallway at midnight. Sun Young said she had taken sleeping pills, so she didn't hear anything. The nanny confirmed hearing footsteps as well. Dongwoo and Haijun gave similar testimonies. Haijun stated that he heard the sound very clearly. The footsteps seemed to be coming from Bina's room. Ji-hye quickly spoke up to explain. Ji-hye insisted that she and her daughter slept soundly last night and didn't know what happened. Bina suddenly spoke up, asking the police to conduct an autopsy because the dark lips were a sign of poisoning. The victim was definitely murdered, so an autopsy was necessary. Only Bina had a blood relationship with the victim, so she had every right to make such a request. The police began checking the security camera footage to see if there was any possibility of an intruder committing the crime. Today was supposed to be the day the will was to be announced, but a murder occurred, so the lawyer didn't show up. The will be announced on another day. No one mourned the artist's death, but the fact that the will wasn't read caused immense sadness. The police checked the security cameras. They confirmed that no outsiders had sneaked into the villa. Therefore, the culprit must be one of these 8 people. Their varying expressions showed that the artist's death was not simple. The police began photographing the crime scene. They searched for the hidden syringe. Haijun rushed to confront Bina. Haijun argued that while the artist was alive, Bina hadn't fulfilled her responsibilities as a daughter. Bina only visited her father a few times a year. After the artist's death, Bina suddenly became a dutiful daughter. Haijun, who cared for the artist daily, hadn't dared to say anything, so what right did Bina have to speak up? Bina explained that she didn't mean anything else. She only wanted to request an autopsy. But Haijun didn't believe that explanation at all. He saw everyone as money-hungry demons. In reality, Bina was the one most interested in the inheritance. She didn't want to explain further. She let Haijun think whatever he wanted. The police began questioning each person. Around 10:30 in the evening last night, the birthday party ended. Sun Young didn't know everyone's whereabouts. Perhaps everyone had gone to bed by then. As for the artist's personality, Sun Young could only say he was a very special person. Ji-hye stated that she didn't know anything, but she always had a feeling of unease. When it was Bina's turn, the police asked what kind of person the artist was. She remained completely silent. At this moment, she realized she knew nothing about her father. Go-won almost didn't feel like she existed in this house. Others didn't care about her, and she didn't care about the people around her either. Go-chul answered the interrogation very cleverly. Go-chul said that the artist appeared cold on the outside, but in reality, he was a very sensitive person. The nanny gave the same testimony. According to the nanny, the artist seemed cold and difficult, but he was very kind. Dongwoo also spoke highly of his employer, asserting that he and the artist considered each other family. Haijun also answered the police very tactfully, saying that the artist was like a biological father to him. The family's relationship was quite complicated. Sun Young was the artist's 51-year-old ex-wife, a former famous director. Sun Young married the artist 25 years ago, and they quickly divorced after 5 years of marriage. The reason for the divorce was the appearance of a third party named Ji-hye. This woman, 42 years old, was a famous former model. She gave birth to a daughter named Bina for the artist. However, the artist did not agree to marry Ji-hye, so she had no official status. Bina became an illegitimate child in everyone's eyes. 17 years ago, the artist reunited with Sun Young. They continued their relationship but did not remarry. A year ago, Sun Young moved in with the artist. He is Go Chul's half-brother. From a young age, the artist was abused by his stepmother, who is also Go Chul's biological mother. Go Eun is Go Chul's daughter. Because her father was frequently imprisoned, she lived with her uncle from a young age. Dongwoo and the artist were college classmates. He used to pursue painting, but later decided to give up his artistic career. 15 years ago, Dongwoo became a manager and lived with the artist. Haijun is the son of the artist's younger brother. Haijun is studying at law school, and all of Haijun's living expenses are covered by the artist. As for the victim herself, people are divided into two opposing factions. Some people praised the artist profusely, but others said he was a very hateful person. Meanwhile, Sun Young was admiring her husband's artwork. Ji-hee stood beside her, secretly watching. Sun Young asked what she was up to. Ji-hee grabbed a bottle of wine and lunged at her. She asked Sun Young if she knew what she was up to. The first wife, of course, knew perfectly well. If Ji-hee hadn't been secretly drinking the wine, why would she have hidden it? Ji-hee was no match for Sun Young. Ji-hee took a large gulp of wine. Then, she accused Sun Young of murdering the artist. This statement was overheard by Bina passing by. Sun Young challenged Ji-hee to provide evidence. There is no evidence now, but it will surely appear in the future. Bina, hiding in a corner, was terrified. Go Chul suddenly asked Ji-hee if she wanted to share any news. Ji-hee ignored the offer. But after thinking for a while, she found Go Chul's sudden conversation with her very suspicious. Could this man have known some secret? Perhaps he was the one who sent the letter. But Ji-hee couldn't ask Go Chul directly. Bina asked why her mother was so certain Sun Young was the culprit. Ji-hee thought for a moment and finally decided to remain silent. No matter how much Bina questioned her, she would resolutely refuse to answer. Early the next morning, Ji-hee drove to a pharmacy. She wanted to confirm if what she had stolen from Sun Young's room was indeed sleeping pills. The sales clerk thought she was blind because the label on the bottle clearly stated it was sleeping pills. Ji-hee asked the clerk to check the pills inside. The clerk noticed the customer's strange expression. Ji-hee immediately explained that her mother always kept strange medicines in this bottle, so she wanted the staff to verify it. The staff opened the lid and carefully inspected the pills. They were fine and indeed sleeping pills. Ji-hee finally breathed a sigh of relief. If they really were sleeping pills, it meant the artist's death was unrelated to Ji-hee. So the pills were fine, and Sun Young wasn't the culprit. Ji-hee shouldn't have been so agitated last night. She was worried about how to face Sun Young. Meanwhile, Go Eun seemed unfazed. She continued filming her daily life. Bina couldn't stand her attitude anymore and directly criticized Go Eun, but the artist's niece seemed unconcerned. This was Go Eun's true personality. Go Eun wondered why she had to pretend to be sad. Ji-hee happily bought a lot of things to take home, but the moment she saw Sun Young, she was terrified. Sun Young slowly approached her. Ji-hee hastily explained that she was drunk last night, and that's why she spoke nonsense. Ji-hee hoped Sun Young wouldn't take her accusations seriously. Sun Young suddenly admitted that she was the culprit. Ji-hee had to explain why she said what she did last night. Ji-hee still insisted that she was drunk and asked Sun Young to forget her words. But Sun Young directly pushed her against the wall. Sun Young warned Ji-hee to be more careful with her words in the future. This time, Sun Young might let it slide, but next time, the consequences would be unpredictable. Ji-hee felt a little panicked. Was Sun Young threatening Ji-hee? Meanwhile, Bina secretly entered her late father's room. Before, she had no feelings for her father, but now that he was gone, Bina felt as if she had lost something precious. A painting hung on the wall in the room. Bina gazed at it for a long time. It seemed the person in the painting was Bina herself. Apparently, the artist still loved his daughter very much. Suddenly, the door to the room opened. Bina quickly looked for a place to hide. The person who entered was Sun Young. She slowly walked towards the painting and pressed a few buttons on the side. Behind the painting was a safe. Bina, terrified, covered her mouth tightly. But in the end, Bina was still discovered by Sun Young. Bina quietly stepped out from her hiding place. Sun Young showed no surprise. The existence of the safe had been revealed. Ji-hee was the most nervous. The safe was quickly opened. However, there was nothing inside. A moment later, everyone was called to gather. The lighting system suddenly went out. The police asked them to hold out their hands. The nanny, Haejun, Sun Young, and Go Eun were all fine. Bina's hands were also perfectly normal. But when the police checked Ji-hee and Go Chul, they discovered something different. It turned out that the police had discovered a phosphorescent substance in the safe. Anyone who had touched it would leave a mark on their hands. The evidence proved that Ji-hee and Go Chul had secretly opened the safe. Both were immediately taken in for questioning. Could the real culprit be one of them? Bina felt that argument was flawed. She was certain her mother had been murdered. Bina went to her father's room to search for clues left by the culprit. But no matter how hard she searched, she found nothing. Just as Bina was about to give up hope, a crucial crucial clue unexpectedly appeared. Bina found a letter hidden under the desk. The envelope clearly bore the logo of Seoul Hospital. Bina hastily opened the letter. It was the artist's medical diagnosis. His cancer was actually cured. The information about the artist not having long to live was a lie. The situation had become much more complicated, but Bina didn't rush to speak. Instead, she began to gauge the attitudes of each person. The nanny seemed completely unaware of this secret. Dongwoo appeared as well. At this moment, the family's lawyer arrived. She came to the mansion to officially announce the will, but the first part of the will had disappeared, having been kept in a safe. Currently, the lawyer only had the latter part. The artist's assets would be divided equally, with each person receiving 10%. The nanny and Dongwoo were also on the list of heirs. 8 people combined would receive 80% of the total assets, with the remaining 20% donated to charity. But this 10% of assets wasn't easy to obtain. Anyone who secretly read the will before its announcement would lose their inheritance rights. Anyone found to be involved in the artist's death would also lose their inheritance rights. That person's assets would be divided equally among the remaining heirs. The nanny was extremely agitated by this information. Her self-criticism report hadn't been in vain, but the nanny was celebrating too soon. The lawyer currently only has the latter part of the will. If the first part of the document cannot be found, the will will also become invalid. Then, the assets will have to be divided according to the law. This also means that all of the artist's assets will belong to Bina, the sole legal heir. The others will receive nothing. The will will take effect in 10 days. Ultimately, will each person receive 10%, or will Bina get everything? The outcome depends on whether they can find the first part of the will within 10 days. Sun Young could no longer sit idly by. Even though the artist had passed away, he still caused those left behind a lot of worry. The nanny was the most anxious. She had dedicated so long to this work, it wasn't easy for her to get a share of her retirement money. But now that money is in danger of slipping out of her grasp, the nanny must find the beginning of the will. As it turned out, the will was never found, but the nanny found a suspicious syringe. She couldn't keep this shocking secret any longer. Haijun only asked a few questions, and the nanny obediently confessed everything. This was something even more important than the will. Haijun immediately devised a wicked plan. Haijun told the nanny to secretly place the syringe in Bina's room, because anyone involved in the artist's death would lose their inheritance rights. Therefore, they needed to eliminate Bina first, and then the others would have a chance to fight for the inheritance. The nanny initially disagreed with doing this against her conscience, but when Haijun mentioned 5 billion won, she began to waver. The nanny used the excuse of cleaning to sneak into Bina's room. But as soon as she opened her backpack, Bina unexpectedly walked in. The nanny had to try to act as normal as possible. After Bina turned her back and left, the nanny quickly stuffed the syringe into her backpack.